And Akiva, over to you.
All right, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for joining. Hello everybody from wherever you are tuning in from. Always fun to connect to the greater Mitzvah JNF community from my little office here in Pardes Chana, to share some thoughts, some insights, and to hear other people's thoughts as well. So I'm not sure if the memo got passed on in time, but I actually changed the name, at least the title of this class. Content is very, very similar, but to make it a little bit more concise and a little bit more focused, the title of this talk is An American Jew in Israel, from making Aliyah to becoming Israeli. So in part, it's definitely based, obviously, on my personal story, but not just to share my story, but to kind of use my own experiences in helping all of us, hopefully, one, create a mini discussion about Israel and what are the unique facets of Israeli society, and how do American society and Israeli society both differ and overlap. So I'm going to use kind of parts of and pieces of my own story to guide this conversation and hopefully this sharing. But again, really the goal being, and this is obviously, maybe not obviously, but it's definitely been a bigger conversation in the global Jewish world. This conversation about diaspora Judaism and the diaspora Jewish community versus Israel Judaism and the Israeli Jewish community. Right? We're in very, very unique times. And when I say that, what I mean is I'll just share this quick little fact from this incredible book that just came out this past year from Daniel Gordis. We Stand Divided. If you have not heard of it, if you have not read it, highly, highly recommended book. I mean, this class, in part at least, is based on a lot of the things that Daniel Gordis talks about in this book. Rachel, is there a reason you're smiling? Did you read this book?
No, Becca joined.
Becca, hello, sorry to put you on the spot. But it's really, really an incredible book. And straight up, if anybody wants to really understand the place of the Jewish people today, this is a must read. You have to read it. And why, you might ask, it's only talking about the American Jewish community and the Israeli Jewish community. Well, let's just go right to his conclusion. And literally, we can have a class series just on this book. All right. Hi, Becca, by the way. In his conclusion, he starts his conclusion like this. Check this out. Really take in this fact. Right? Really listen to this figure. He says in 1880, just a mere 140 years ago, the combined Jewish population of the United States and Palestine totaled 275,000 people. As the world's Jewish population at that point was approximately 7.8 million, these two communities, America and basically Israel, in the year 1880, represented a mere 3% of the world's Jews. We can't even imagine such a reality today. And he goes on today, of course, to say, today the US and Israel account for 85% of the world's Jews. Only 15% of world Jewry lives outside of Israel and America. So we're living in very, very unique times. I like to tell my students, hopefully the ones from on the call remembered me saying this, but I like to tell my students that we are living in such unique times because we're living in a generation where there are these like two Jewish superpowers, right? And the last time we had a reality, a moment in time where we had two Jewish superpowers, we have to go back thousands of years, Israel and Babylonia, let's say, right? And today it's America and it's Israel. With all of their unique and different facets, and again, the things that they share in common, right? So I personally find this topic fascinating, right? What is the American Jewish community today? How can we describe it? How did it get there? What is the Israeli Jewish community today? Of course, it's not monolithic. Of course, there's much diversity in each community, different colors and kinds and movements within. Of course, it's not black and white, but we do know that these are two very, very different communities that have been created now as a result of decades and decades of experience and history. And many people today, and Daniel Gordis talks about this in his book, he talks about this drifting apart. Like he asked the question, at least I'll ask the question. And I think in his book, he does answer by saying there is this drift that is happening. And where is that drift going to take us? And if we're not happy with that drift, how can we bring it back? These are all questions I'm kind of throwing out at you now. We'll explore some of them at least, hopefully by the end. But I do want to, after having kind of, painted that big picture of hold on one second, painting that big picture of the context of this class, I want to go kind of, zoom in again, using some of the pieces and parts of my own story to kind of highlight what I see as one of the most interesting and even important aspects of this big dialogue between America and Israel is, what is the flavor of these two communities? What are their attributes? What are their character traits? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? So let's kind of begin a little bit of a journey, and I'll share parts and pieces of my own journey again to facilitate this. So let's begin. So some of you guys know me better than others who are on this call, but I'll just say I came from, I grew up in New York, in a suburb of New York City, without giving you my whole life story. As my students on the call know, it takes me a very, very long time to tell that story. But just like, little bits and pieces, I grew up in a suburb of New York, Jewish, but highlighting the ish part of the Jewish, very, very loosely connected to anything Jewish. I went to public school, which meant I went to Hebrew school, which meant I got a pretty, let's call it a light Jewish education, the light of the light. And my connection to Israel was completely non-existent. Okay. Let me just go like this. Yofi. My connection to Israel was completely non-existent. I'm not sure. I'm just trying to move I don't know how you guys see your screen. Sorry for getting technical for a second. Is there any way to move do you guys see me on the main screen? You do? Okay, Sababa. I see something different, but it's all good.
You can change it if you want to see everybody on the top right-hand corner.
Yeah, I see that. I mean, not to be all arrogant, but is there a way to just see me as the main thing? It's just
you can change that to speaker view.
When I do that, it's not me, but whatever. It's all good. I don't want to get bogged down in that. Anyway, so basically very, very little connection Jewishly, very, very little connection with Israel. And, my journey goes on. Eventually in college, I get more connected to Judaism, and that goes hand in hand with the connection to Israel. Again, I'm leaving out many, many pieces of the story, but this is not the point of this class to tell that story. But I personally came to Israel for the first time when I was 22 years old. Just to give a little context of that, I graduated college in, let's date myself a little bit, 1997. Okay, I worked for a year as a teacher in New York City, saved up some money. And in 1998, I did something that I'd wanted to do for a long time, and I went traveling. I traveled first to West Africa for 2 months to continue my drums and percussion studies, as I was studying drumming back then and continued to be a drummer. And after that, I was off to Israel. Right? I had this desire already towards the end of my time in college. I wanted to go to Israel. I wasn't exactly sure why. I don't want to become like all religious or anything. I just wanted to go to Israel and see what was happening there and connect to my roots and learn a little bit more about my history, something I was lacking in my own personal life. So again, I graduate, I work, I save up money, I go traveling, a little bit opposite of the Israeli experience where you graduate high school, you go to the army, then you go traveling, and then you go to college, okay? But that was my American experience. I'll say this, when I get to West Africa, and this is important as you'll see why, when I get to West Africa in 1998, I spent 2 months there in Ghana and Senegal, and I was so fascinated by what I was seeing every single day. The culture shock, the culture, the people, the colors, the customs, the music. It was unbelievable. It was incredibly vivid. And as a result, I wanted to document it as much as I possibly can. So I wrote in my journal every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. I traveled at the time with my twin sister, and our friends would always ask her, why is your brother always writing in that book? What's he writing about? Right? I was writing about them. I was writing about the experience and the things I was seeing. So I wrote, ferociously in this journal. I took, an incredible amount of pictures before digital cameras. It was film, and I was not a picture taker back then. By the end of my 2 months in West Africa, I filled up 3 journals of writing, and I took 13 rolls of film. Okay, keep that in mind. I then from there go to Israel. a foreign land, a place I'd never been to before. I land in Israel. I spent a few days with a cousin in Tel Aviv. I get to Jerusalem. It's Sukkot time. Literally still the first week in Israel. I'm not like all like, religious yet. I'm not going to yeshiva. I don't even know what a yeshiva is yet. I'm just like hanging out, enjoying Jerusalem, especially during the festive holiday season. And I'm sitting, I'm standing on top of a roof in the old city of Jerusalem outside someone's sukkah. And after a very long conversation with somebody, it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I just like look at the sky, the big moon in the sky, and I look at the old city from this incredible view, and I just have this feeling like, wow, I can stay here forever. A few weeks go by, my first trip to Israel, and I realized something. It hits me. It hits me a few weeks into my trip that 1, I stopped writing in my journal, and 2, I stopped taking pictures. And I was like, why? Like Africa, I've never been to, and I don't know if I will ever go there again. And Israel, I've never been to. I'm not sure when I will return to this place either. But there, I documented like crazy with my journal and my camera. And here in Israel, I'm not doing that. Yet everything is new to me here as well. What's going on? I literally sat and thought about it, and it hit me. It hit me really, really deeply. I basically realized that here in Israel, I felt a sense of being at home. I felt a sense of place, to borrow an ecological term I learned about when I was in college. I felt like I belonged. I felt like I was connected to this place. In a way, I definitely didn't feel like I feel in Africa, and I barely even felt in my own hometown in New York. Right, so here, like I'm just in the land for a few weeks, and I feel this deep connection to it, and I realized, wait a minute, I feel home here. It was a surprising feeling. I was not expecting to feel that. I was expecting to travel, backpack on my back, go to West Africa, go to Israel a little bit, maybe go on a kibbutz, learn some Hebrew, go back to America, continue the rest of my life. That's not what happened, obviously. I fell deeply in love with Israel. Eventually, after traveling around for 2 months, I discovered Tzfat. I fell in love with Tzfat. I went to yeshiva there. I spent 5 or 6 months there. And then after 8 months of traveling, 10 months, however long it was, I come back to America, on a whole new journey. And over the next 5 years, I knew in my heart that I needed to get back to Israel, and I knew that one day I would live in Israel for the rest of my life. I knew that. I didn't have a concrete plan. That plan came to me in the form of my wife, who I started dating in 2002. We got married in 2003, and our last stage of our dating process was basically her saying, okay, we love each other, but I'm making Aliyah next year after I finish my master's degree. We're both in New York City for our master's. And she said to me, like, are you going to do the same? And she's like, if you want to make Aliyah, yeah, we're going to get married. And if you don't, the whole thing ends right here, right? So long story short, I said, yalla, let's do it together. And we got married. We made Aliyah together in 2004. And thank God we've been here ever since, all right? So I just want to highlight that piece, that there was this surprising feeling and realization for me as like this American Jew that grew up with no connection to Israel. I had no Zionism, no Israel education, no HSI. I never even heard of HSI. I would have been the perfect candidate for HSI when I was a kid. I never even heard about it, right? Back then, we're still too good of a secret, right? Zionism, literally never even heard of it, okay? It just wasn't part of my life. It wasn't part of my family's life. No one in my family had ever been to Israel. No one ever talked about Israel. For me, growing up as a kid, Israel was this thing I saw on the news. I love to watch the news with my parents. It's 6 o'clock news, it's 7 o'clock news, right? And if I was still up, at the 10 or 11 o'clock news. And every now and then I would see like these like flashes, these images from the Middle East, Israel in war, dusty, dirty, and all that kind of, that was Israel for me, war, conflict, bombs. And then once a year, my Hebrew school, like really bad falafel that they tried to serve us, all right? So basically, here I am. I'm back in America, and I'm like deeply in love with Israel. I became religious. I'm like studying. I'm teaching a Jewish education now. This is the 5-year gap between first going to Israel and meeting my wife and getting married. But then again, just to fast forward back to the part of the story that we're up to, it's 2004. My wife and I make Aliyah. And for me, I made Aliyah because it's like the Jewish homeland. It's like the Jewish people. It's like Am Yisrael, it's Eretz Yisrael. How can you not, right? And I feel so joyous and so like b'simcha, so happy with my choice. It's like the best thing I ever did. I'll just share a little snippet from my story. We made Aliyah with Nefesh B'Nefesh, as most American Jews do today, and have been for many years. And when we get off the plane, it's like a movie, right? You go down the stairs and there's like all these people, to greet you. And it's like this big ceremony because like we were like, one of the first flights that Nefesh B'Nefesh had was years ago. And as we're coming off the plane with the stairs, I always bring my guitar on the plane with me. And I brought it, I was carrying it down the stairs with me. I'm like, wait a minute, this is like this crazy moment. I'm like making Aliyah. Like, the first time in my life, I'm coming to Israel without a return ticket. I'm coming on a one-way ticket. And, during those 5 years, I'd been to Israel pretty much every year, but of course, always having a return ticket. And here I'm coming, making Aliyah with my like brand new wife, like for a brand new life. It's like this unbelievable moment. And like, I got to take out my guitar and like play a song, right? So I take out my guitar. I asked my wife to hold my case, and I'm walking down like with my guitar in my hand, and I didn't even like think what song to sing. Just like burst out of my mouth. Of course, Am Yisrael Chai, right? And I'm like singing, playing my guitar. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Just like feeling so, elated at this experience. And as I get to the bottom, there's these chayalim, these soldiers, Israeli soldiers who made like 2 lines that were walking in between to greet us. And as I'm walking down, playing my guitar and singing Am Yisrael Chai, they're all singing with me. They start to sing with me. It's like this euphoric moment. I'm like having this unbelievable like life moment. This is the best. Wow, right? So we come to Israel. We're off to a great start. And then over like the next, literally like even few weeks, I mean, it sounds kind of funny to say, next few weeks, next few months for sure, that joy is joined by another kind of feeling, all right, which is the feeling of like, oh, you know what? I've been to Israel many times in these past 5 years, but I never like really lived here, right? I never like, I don't know, had to really speak Hebrew. I never had to like read a bill in Hebrew. I never had to really even speak to anybody in Israel. Literally, my first time in Israel, I was here for 6 months. Didn't speak or even learn a lick of Hebrew. Pretty much the direct opposite experience of David Mitchell. Okay, and every time I came to visit, I was like either going to Sfat or to Jerusalem to hang out with my friends and like learning yeshiva, play music, and like celebrate Shabbat. I wasn't like getting into the Israeli experience. I was getting into the Jewish spiritual experience that was so vibrant in Israel. And that's what, that's what it motivated me and inspired me to make Aliyah, right? That was my own personal journey. When I got here, nothing negative, but it's just like reality hits me in the face, right? Like, oh, right. Like I have to like learn Hebrew now. Oh my God, I don't know any Hebrew except for like biblical Hebrew, right? Which actually came in very, very handy in Opan. I knew all kinds of strange words from like the Mishnah and the Gemara that all my classmates didn't, but whatever. I still like barely could speak Hebrew. But basically I get here and again, like reality, hits me in the face. And I start to realize, that Israel is not all, cooking for Shabbat and playing music with your friends and like learning in yeshiva, right? You have to like, have a life and you have to like get a job and you have to like pay bills and you have to like read the signs in Hebrew and you have to like learn Hebrew and you have to converse in Hebrew and you have to talk to the neighbor and all these different kinds of things. I want to give you just like a few little kind of moments in time that kind of like, paint this picture even better. There's so many of these moments, but I'm literally just going to pick a few. Kind of like, welcome to Israel, like welcome to reality moments. I literally remember it must have been the first week we were there. My wife and I moved into like this, house, we're big house in this moshav outside of Jerusalem, gorgeous. It was like a great way to land. We didn't realize, after that, our house would keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Welcome to the Israel experience as we got more and more kids. We started out with 0 kids in a huge house, and we ended up in Jerusalem with 3 kids in like this tiny little apartment. Then we came to Pardes Chana, a bit bigger of a house, 4 kids. Okay, Sababu, I'm somewhere in the middle. But I remember like literally within days of moving in, we emptied all our boxes. We had like this huge pile of cardboard boxes on the curb waiting for somebody to pick it up. We didn't know who was going to pick it up, but we're thinking like in America, they have like curbside pickup, whatever. And so then we get a knock on the door one evening and we recognize it's our neighbor who we didn't get a chance yet to talk to. We're like, oh, this is so cool. It's our neighbor coming over to like say hi and welcome us to Israel. But that's not what it was. He basically says, when are you going to move those boxes? Right? So that was kind of like one of our first kind of like, Israel, like in your face, let's get right to like the story here, yeah, hi, whatever, like, can you please clean up the curb? Another little experience that happened in that house was, thank God our landlord that year spoke really, really good English and we were able to converse with him, no problem. But one day he had like this complicated heating system in the house. And so we sent over like a handyman to like explain to me how to use the heating system because it was getting cold. So this guy comes in, and not only is this guy like Israeli who doesn't speak any English, this guy is like Moroccan. And I'm not sure if that means anything to any of you, right? But a Moroccan Israeli doesn't speak typical Israeli Hebrew. They speak a whole other kind of Hebrew, like with like, speaking out of their gut, like every word like guttural. It's like a different form of the language. And I couldn't understand a single thing the guy said. This guy gives me a 45-minute tour of our house and the heating system, explaining to me in detail what to do and how to do and when to do. And I'm like, just like nodding my head like politely, and then like I escort him to the door. My wife's like, new, like, so how do we use the thing? I'm like, I have no idea, right? I don't understand the thing the guy just said. But all like these kind of moments. But I'll fast forward from here, and I'll say this, and this is really kind of getting to the heart of like what I really want to share, is as time unfolds, eventually we go to Opan, we learn Hebrew, and I'm like loving it. I'm like learning like this new language, but not just that, like this ancient language that comes to life. I was like this little kid, like feeling like it was in first grade all over again, like learning a brand new language, and it was so exciting for me, like to learn how the Hebrew language worked, the ins and the outs. But as time moved on, I started to realize something. I started to like become more and more aware that there was something in Israel that I've never experienced anywhere else. I even came up with a catchphrase for it, or I thought I coined this catchphrase, only in Israel. I called these moments only in Israel moments. Like these things that you won't see anywhere in the world, like, not even in like Brooklyn, Williamsburg, like, except for Israel. It's like these only in Israel moments. Like I thought like I really coined this phrase so much that I went to Facebook, eventually, and I started like a new group on Facebook called Only in Israel. Like 2 days later, I get like this really nasty email from this woman who says, "What are you doing? You're making a competing group for us. We already started a group called Only in Israel." I'm like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize." And I discovered this whole world of other Olim immigrants like myself who were so fascinated and in awe of these moments that they were experiencing too as new immigrants to this land that they also called only in Israel moments, right? And there are also so many thousands of these only in Israel moments. I'll share with you some of the ones that came my way that really helped me to see that there's something that's happening that's just so unique to Israel, because Israel has become a Jewish state, because the Jewish people have returned to their Jewish homeland, right? And revived themselves and have recreated a culture that we can call Jewish for the first time in, let's say, like 2,000 years, right? With all the different pieces and parts, the Ashkenaz, the Sephardi, the ancient, the modern, everything mixed together, of course, right? But it's something that's so unique to this piece of land in the world. Just some things that I noticed that I never saw anywhere, right? Only in Israel moments. Take Ben Yehuda Street. Like, you've been there. Maybe you've even seen what I'm about to say. Ben Yehuda Street, hanging out, getting some food, shopping, whatever. Middle of the day, lots of teenagers hanging out. And they're like these cool, like, Israeli dudes, teenagers with the spiked hair and the ripped jeans. And they're like hanging out with their friends and they're looking all cool. They look like they're going to get into a fight with someone like any second. And then they pass the Chabad tefillin table. And what do? Without like missing a beat, they all stop and they put on tefillin, right? They take the kippah of the Chabad guy, they take the tefillin, they put it on. They don't need the card. They know what to do. They say Shema, they say the blessings. And it's just like, what? These cool dudes in public, in front of all of these other cool people, are not embarrassed to put on tefillin? Like, for me, it was like a shocker. I mean, I was already religious at that point, right? But I know for me, if I went back to when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, putting on tefillin, no way. In public, no way. In a place like Ben Yehuda Street, absolutely not, right? And I just realized that this is like what people do. It's like, it's part of their culture. It's part of like Israel, right? It goes back to like the music class that I taught last time, right? Where even like the quote unquote secular Israelis, one, knows so much and do so much and are so connected, right, to Jewish tradition, because it's just part and parcel. It's interwoven into the Israeli cultural experience. So that's one thing. Another great little story. Became a full-time teacher, I think, at MUS. I had to do this thing called Tium MUS. And I used to do some part-time stuff for MUS before I became a full-time teacher. You have to do this weird thing for taxes, whatever. So I had to go to the office. Maybe now you can do it online, I'm not sure. But back then, I had to go into the office, take a number, sit and wait. And it's just like bureaucracy central, right? Nobody wants to be there. No one's happy to be there. It's a little bit like the DMV in America, or like the Board of Education office in New York City. All right. Nobody's happy. So I finally, get called. I walk into this guy's office and, he's like a typical Israeli guy, like pants, shirt, no kippah, clean shaven, whatever. And he's all Israeli, and he looks at me, you know, and I got my kippah, and I got my beard, like my peyot were hanging out, my tzitzit. And he's like, you're like Hasidic? You're Hasidic? I'm like, well, you know, whatever. We start like a little conversation. He's like, you're Breslov, you're Karlibach. He's like shooting out all these names. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, da, da, da. You know, try to describe myself to him so he's happy with my like categorization of what kind of Jew I am. And then he says to me like this, straight up, Israeli style. He's like, just so you know, I don't believe in God, right? I don't believe in God. I don't believe in all this, but I want to show you something. What does he do? He goes to his drawer of his desk. He pulls open one of the drawers, and literally he takes out a book. I'm not even kidding. It's 5 times as high as this book I'm holding in my hand. He plops it on the table. And what does he say? He says, these are my own personal thoughts about the weekly Torah portion over the past few years. Like, what? You just called yourself a secular Jew who doesn't believe in God and think the Torah is made by humans, you know? Yet you've been writing like week after week for years, like your own personal thoughts on the weekly Torah portion, like welcome to Israel, right? Only in Israel kind of moments. I'll just, you know, again, there's hundreds, there's thousands of these. I'll share 1 or 2 other quick ones. This is very, very classic. You're in the line at the supermarket. You got your cart full of food, people behind you, in front of you. It's a big balagan because it's Israel. And then the woman behind you, she's like, oh my God, I forgot something, whatever it was, you know? And she's holding a baby. Right? And what does she do? Literally gives you her baby. She's like, can you hold my baby for a few moments? I'll be right back. And you're like stuck there, like, you know, like with this baby, and this woman's gone. All right. In Israel, nobody flinches. Nobody thinks anything weird of it, you know, except for maybe Olim, right? In America, forget about it. By the time that woman got back, there would be police. She'd be like cuffed. She'd be taken to like, you know, services, whatever you call it in America, social services. But it's like, that's not the way here, right? And before I go on, I just want to say this isn't to like, you know, look at Israel through rose-colored glasses, that there's no imperfections, nothing's bad here. Of course, we have tons of imperfections. We have lots of issues, of course. Look at the newspaper every single day, including today, right? It never ceases to like amaze me how many problems we still have as a people. But at the same time, we can't hide from the fact that what's happening in Israel today is monumental, is unique, is historic. Right? And it's because, again, we as a people have returned and we created ourselves, not only as a people you can have anywhere, right? But we recreated ourselves as a nation, and we have nationhood again in our national homeland, right? And we know, everyone knows, whoever's on this call, you know it yourself. I don't have to tell you, like, Israel's not just a country, it's like an experience. It's like a Jewish experience. It's like a family. It's like this, you know, big Jewish family with all the amazing parts and all like the annoy you forever parts, right? But it's family. And it's not weird, you know, for someone to like hand me their baby. You know, it's not weird. And you know how many times I've gotten into fights with Israelis, and it feels so good. I should just tell you as a quick aside, it feels so good to yell in Hebrew. Oh my God. I remember the first time I got into a fight with an Israeli in Hebrew. It was the best Hebrew I ever spoke up until that point in my life. Right, just my like adrenaline was flowing, and I was just like yelling. I'm like, oh my! At the end of the conversation, I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just so impressed with my own Hebrew. Right, like that was cool. I should do that more often. Right, but I can't tell you how many times I've gotten into like a little tiff, or like even like a serious fight with an Israeli, like yelling, screaming in a car, from a car, in the store, whatever. And right afterwards, like we're like hugging and joking and like like as if nothing ever happened. I've experienced that. I've seen that many times. Years ago, we're on our way to Pesach with my wife's family for the entire week. Packed up the car with the kids, with all of our stuff packed to the brim. We're just about to leave Jerusalem. We lived in Jerusalem at the time. And we're at a red light, and this guy didn't see that the light was red, and he smacked into the back of our car. The New Yorker in me, I'm from New York, the New Yorker in me surfaces. I get out of the car, I'm like, ah! You know, flip out, like, you know, my students probably never seen. I hope not, at least, right? And like, we're like fighting, this is and that. I'm like, oh my God, what did you do? Like, I have this big bump in the car. I can't even open up the back, you know, it's like a hatchback thing. On my way to Pesach, oh my God. We've exchanged information, numbers, whatever. And at the end, literally on the highway, like in the middle of the road, we're hugging each other, wishing each other Chag Sameach. Don't worry, brother, it's going to be okay. You know, it's like, you know, so Israeli. So where I want to take this conversation from here, right? We're more than halfway through the conversation, right? And using all those experiences of my own, I want to take it to like the next, to the next stage. I've been thinking about this just very recently. I mean, those who know me well through work or the classroom, they know that I like to call it positively obsessed with the Aliyah experience. Right? That's why I published the book a few years ago called Becoming Israeli. You can buy it on Amazon.com. That was not whatever, just kidding. For those who don't have it, I'm sure everyone has it. Especially at the JNF conference a couple of years ago, you got a free copy. Anyway, but I am positively obsessed with the Aliyah experience. And just literally this week, this phrase came to me. Just literally a few days ago, this phrase came to me that I feel sums me up really well. And that is born in the USA, to use that phrase. Born in the USA, made in Israel. Right? Maybe that would be the next, the title of my next book. I'm not sure. Don't use it. Okay. But for me, that's like a very, very deep statement. Right? Because I was born in the USA. I was born there. I spent like the first 28 years of my life. They were shaped by those experiences, many amazing, positive, constructive experiences. But I really do feel, I've been living here now for about 16 years. I feel like I was made in Israel. I feel like there was something about Israel that made me into who I am. In a way, and again, this isn't like a hierarchy thing. This isn't like a better, worse thing. This isn't judgmental. I hope it's not coming across like that at all. This is my own personal experience and my own personal take. But I feel like something about Israel made me to who I am today. I know I'm not the same person I was 16 years ago. Besides getting older, having 4 kids and a lot more white in my beard, besides all of that, I really feel like a different person in the way that I would not be the same person if I continued to spend these 16 years in America, right? Again, with no offense to America, what is it? And, I'm sure some of you guys have heard, things said about it, maybe read books about it, talked about it, thought about it. Again, this book talks about this kind of stuff a lot. The book Started Nation, if you haven't read another amazing book, talks about it a lot. What is it about like the Israeli experience, the Israeli DNA that people like to talk about? And even though I didn't grow up into the Israeli culture and society, just tonight, literally as we're eating dinner tonight, my daughter, 11 years old, says to me and my wife, like, wow, that's really sad. Like, Iman Abba, you'll never have the Israeli army experience that we will have. Just out of the blue, she said that to us, 11 years old. Like, you're right, totally. And I will never, ever get what it means to be in the army. And as a result, I know this. It's a little sad, but like that's the reality. I will never even fully get the Israeli experience because I missed out on that army experience. I made Aliyah when I was 28. I was married. I was like an old fogey to the IDF. They'd never even sent me a letter, right? But those are the pieces. The IDF experience, obviously being one of the fundamental and formative experiences to the Israeli experience and to the Israeli identity, right? That we know is so strong, right? But even if I missed out on that, there's still so many things I experienced here in Israel over the past 16 years that I feel have made me and made this country to the country that it is, with all the ups and all the downs and all the all arounds, the great and the bad and the getting better and getting worse. Just to highlight a couple of things that I've personally seen along the way these past 16 years. What I think really, helps to shape the society here. And again, when I say these things, it's not to say that they're not part of America, that it's not part of your experience wherever you live, but I think they're really strong here in Israel. And from my life perspective, they're stronger here than they are in America, right? One, right off the bat, right out of the gate, is taking initiative, right? A phrase we call being a rosh gadol. Right? It took me years to learn this phrase and a few more years to really understand this phrase, but I love this phrase. Right? If I had to pick one thing that made Israel what it is, this is the phrase: to be a rosh gadol, to take initiative, not to wait for other people to solve the problem. You go look for the solution yourself. Right? Get off your butt and start doing something already. Right? I'll give you, there's so many stories of this, but I'll give you one example. Years ago, I was with a group of students. We were on our way to Masada. It was early in the morning. We were then sleeping at the Ein Gedi hostel, so we didn't have the luxury of just waking up, putting our bags on the bus, and walking to the mountain of Masada. We had to put our bags on the bus and then drive 15 minutes south to get to Masada. So we're all on the bus. We're all excited. Everyone's adrenaline is flowing. It's like 4:30 in the morning, whatever. And the gate of the hostel that we're staying in, the gate, this massive gate of the parking lot, isn't opening like it's supposed to. We called, this isn't that, it's not opening. I'm like flipping out. 5 minutes, 10 minutes goes, it's not opening, right? We're trying all the things that we're supposed to do that they told us to do. It's not opening. And I'm like flipping out. I'm like sitting on the bus with all these students, like wanting to give them like this like ultimate Masada experience. And I'm freaking out. We're going to get there late and we're going to miss the sunrise on top of Masada, right? Meanwhile, without me knowing, my madrich, my Israeli madrich, who at the time was 23 years old, fresh out of the army, this specific madrich was in a very, very elite unit, right? Without whining and without complaining like I was doing in the bus, he gets off the bus and he starts tinkering with the wires of the gate. He opens up the gate. We're on our way. We don't miss the sunset at all. For me, that was a very profound experience, right? And it really taught me something about like the Israeli DNA. Like, why sit and complain if you can try to figure out the solution yourself? Right? Yes, there's times to like ask people to help you out, of course, but like don't just like sit there like I was, right? And not try anything. And that for me was like a really, really moving and profound experience, something I see very, very often in this culture. A second thing I want to share with you is, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm like from New York, I'm not sure. Maybe it's like unique to my family experience, but I grew up in a classic New York, sorry, mom and dad, grandma and grandpa and everybody else in my family, but I grew up in a classic neurotic New York Jewish family, like to the T, like according to the book. Uptight about everything, uptight about money especially, right? You know, all these different things. And of course there's like, you know, positive things and like being careful with money, of course, but like to an extreme, there are all these things in my like New York Jewish experience that can like leave you buzzing and like I can't calm down and like I gotta like freak out about everything. And I can't tell you how many family arguments I heard growing up. My grandparents' generation all spoke Yiddish, right? They were from Poland, from a shtetl there. That was their first language. And I heard Yiddish a lot growing up. The reason I never learned a lick of Yiddish is because 90% of the time when I heard Yiddish, it was in the form of people shouting at each other. So I had this deep mental block against Yiddish, right? As much as I think it's a nice language. But there's a lot of uptightness. I come to Israel, right, later on in my life, 22 the first time, 28 when I make Aliyah finally. And there's something here I noticed. Like, I'm going to be straight up. Like, it was a different kind of Jew. I just wasn't used to living around the Jews that I was experiencing and seeing and living amongst in Israel. Religious, secular didn't matter. It was like a cultural thing. Right? It wasn't a religious thing. And I just felt then, and I still feel today, and I'm sorry that I'm saying this so many times, I really don't mean to sound judgmental, but I think maybe even a lot of people would agree with me here, that there's something about the Israeli like psyche that just like, stop, enjoy life, chill out, take that extra time to be with your family and your friends. Yes, I don't keep Shabbat, but I'm definitely going to my parents on Friday night to sit with them and have wine and challah and a great dinner and a great conversation. You know, yes, I make no money and my balance is negative in my bank like it is every month, but I'm still going to put out the extra shekels to get a meal with my friend, to get a coffee. I see that all the time here in a way that I never experienced, you know, myself growing up. And there is just like this openness. And this is another thing we talked about in my last class with the music. I'm not going to get into it too deep right now, but just this idea of like enjoying life here, because life is intense here. Right? Life is so intense with the conflict and the tension in the army and your kids, and you don't know where they are and what's going on, especially if there's a war, especially if there's an intifada or like a terror wave. It's freaking intense. And Israelis have figured out a way to deal with it, and that's called being happy and choosing to be happy and enjoying life, right? It's like a defense mechanism. It's like a survival tactic here. And for me, like not having grown up with that, that was a surprise. That was a shock and such a pleasant one, right? And again, I think it's one of the things that really makes Israel into not only the society that it is today, but the successful society that it is today. There's many, many more examples, but I don't want to, go too long with this. I want to wrap up with two more thoughts, okay? One is going back to my own personal experience, and then the other is to weave it back into this book that I shared at the beginning. Obviously, you can tell I love Israel and I love living in Israel, and working at HSI is like, that's my job. I get to teach about Israel. Like they call it a job. It's awesome, right? Of course, there's hard parts. I have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and all that kind of stuff, but it's all good, right? When I get to my class, when I see my students, oh, so worth it, right? But But obviously, like anywhere in the world, there's tough moments. Of course, there's challenging moments. Like it's not utopia here, of course, right? And oftentimes, I want to take you actually to a moment on one of my Tiulim with my students. We're in the Negev. We just learned about David Ben Gurion, about the Negev, the vision of the Negev, the uses of the Negev, the advantages of the Negev. We visited his retirement home in Kibbutz Sde Boker. We just visited his grave, and then we're sitting down for our final conversation of the day. And I asked my students, about their own personal connection with Israel. What is it? Like, what does Israel mean to you at this point in your life? And what do you want it to mean in the future? Right, so we have this beautiful conversation, like students, share such awesome things. And then like the last few minutes before we get back in the bus, I asked my students, look, I'm someone who made Aliyah. I'm an American Jew who moved to Israel. I made Aliyah. I made this radical change, which if you look at the numbers, the percentage of Jews making Aliyah from America, very, very small. Right? I did this radical thing, at least from the American Jewish perspective. Like, why would I do such a thing? Do you have any questions for me? And of course, they always have awesome questions, when the last group to get to the bus because of that, but it's totally worth it. And they ask the questions and I answer, and there's always a student who asks me the question, would you ever move back? Can you ever see yourself moving back to America? And I share with him, straight up, truthfully, personally, I said, look, there's definitely been times when I've thought about moving back. What would I do in America? What would my life be like? What would my job be? And I share, especially at the beginning, when our honeymoon period started to end, my wife and I were like, oh, why don't we move to make Aliyah to Northern California or something amongst the redwoods, much chiller there. But, yes, that question has passed my mind, it's passed our mind, of course. But literally, and I'm not just saying this, literally, every time I've toyed with the idea, I always come back to the answer, no, I wouldn't do it. And the number one reason why is something I've not yet talked about in this class, and that's my children, right? Raising children here. I mean, I never raised children in America, so I have nothing to compare it to. But I know from my experience of raising kids here, it's like, I wouldn't want to raise my children anywhere else. And I think when we look at the experience of children in Israel and raising children in Israel, we get a really, really deep insight into the Israeli experience, right? And I'll just share a couple quick highlights of what that means for me, right? First of all, I mean, this might sound weird, but I remember when my oldest, he's now 13 years old and almost as tall as I am, and I'm 6 feet tall. But when he was around 5 or 6, and that would sound strange, but when he was 5 or 6, I caught him, so to speak, on the couch reading a book about the Holocaust. I don't know where he got the book from. I don't know where, it wasn't from our library. And he sat there and I'm looking at this book. I'm like, and pictures and I have words, and I'm like, what do I say? How do I, And basically what came out of that is he already heard about stuff. Right, he already heard things for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old on his level, but he already knew that there was this thing called the Holocaust, the Shoah. Right? How do you know about the Holocaust at such a young age? When my parents and my family did all they could to guard me from such a thing for years and years, because he lives in Israel, and every single year we have Yom HaShoah. And yes, even the little cute little kids in Gan, 3 years old, 4 years old, and 5 years old, on that day, they're going to hear the siren go on. And of course, their kindergarten teachers are going to have to explain to them in a way that's appropriate for their age, that there's a siren, this is what we do, this is what it means, we stand up, we give respect, right? So they're already starting to learn about these things and hear about these things at a young age, way before I ever heard about the Shoah, right, when I was growing up in America. So there's just this sense of growing up faster here. Yes, I'm sure there's negative aspects of that, for sure. But I think there's a lot of positive aspects as well. It's not only about the Holocaust, it's about the conflict. Let's be honest. You can't hide the conflict from your kids here for too long. They watch, and my wife and I, maybe because we're both American, we tried to. We really, really did. We tried to not talk about things in front of them. We, whatever, to the best of our ability, blocking things. But they always came home and heard about it from their friends at school who had older siblings who heard about it somehow. About the latest terrorist attack, and they'd ask us questions. I'm like, what? My kid's 7 years old, and I'm talking to him. He's asking me a question about someone who tried to stab a Jew in Machne Yehuda Shuk. How do I deal with that? Why do I have to deal with that? It was really intense for me as as a person, but also as an immigrant, right? So the growing up was so much more here.
it's in their face, and they have to deal with it because it's part and parcel of society. So there's that aspect, right? Just being more aware of like the realities of the world. Second thing I would say is the amount of independence. Right? Maybe it's because my parents are who they were, or maybe because like I'm a New York Jew, I don't know what. But I was not given independence as a kid, right? I mean, like the first time I went to the mall, like with a friend, that was like, wow. That was like, you're a man now, son. You know, you can walk the mall by yourself. And here in Israel, and again, I'm sure a lot of people have seen this, even if you don't live here, Israeli kids just grow up more independently. Right, where I live, you know, we live right next to the center of town, and from the age of like 7 and 8, my kids are going into town by themselves to meet up with a friend, with other siblings, to get something, to pick up something, whatever it might be. There's many examples of this, but there is this independence, right? And for a while, I'll be honest with you, it kind of like, one, it didn't make sense to me, and it kind of even irritated me on some level that there's so much independence, and it only grows with time. Right? Again, my oldest is 13 in 8th grade. I can't believe the amount of independence. I wouldn't even say we're giving him, but he's basically demanding from us. And I see it even more so in the high school age here in Israel. And then it really hit me, like, you know, why do Israeli kids have so much independence? It's because, you know what, when they're 18 years old, they're going to be giving 2 to 3 years of their life in the service of this country. So yes, make their lives up until then as fun and free as possible. Of course, in a safe way. We're not stupid, right? We're not being unsafe, but to the best of our ability, let's make our kids enjoy life and feel that freedom before they don't have freedom, because they're basically exchanging their freedom, right, for serving their country and ensuring that we all have freedom here in this Jewish state. And when I realized that, that for me was like a big epiphany, right? And that's maybe what makes it a little bit more easier, you know, for me when my kid literally, yes, 13 years old, you know, will stay out to 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes because it's like a special happening, you know, happening here, like in the community, right? And I can give like so many different examples, but I'll just give like one example of like, you know, maybe like this independence, like my son, you know, he just goes on these bike rides with his friends. And again, he's 13 years old. When I was 13 years old, I went to the mall. That was like my big outing. My son, his big outing today is getting on his mountain bike with his other friends on their mountain bike. They got their backpacks, right? They drive out to a Mayan, which is like a natural spring, and they chill out at the Mayan, right? And they make coffee in their own little coffee maker, you know, camping coffee kind of thing. I'm like, I never did that when I was 13 years old. And it's just like there's this Israeli experience, right? And I have to say that I feel like I have understood the Israeli experience more and more as my own kids have been experiencing that experience as they have gotten older, right? They've kind of opened up the doors for us, whether it be music of Israel, like I shared in the last class, or other things. It's really through them that my wife and I, as Olim, we're Americans, yeah. So even though my Hebrew got better, but I still speak with an accent, and I still like sometimes can understand someone, and I still sometimes, you know, whatever, get frustrated at certain things the way Israelis do it. I'll, you know, the other day I had to bring my car in for a test, and because we had, you know, 2 months of lockdown here, nobody could really do tests, so the lines are insanely long right now. And of course, I get online and I said to myself, I'm not even kidding. I did a mantra, I did a meditation. I said, Akiva, don't get upset. If anybody cuts the line, just breathe, okay? Don't get upset. Don't get into a fight. It's going to be okay. One person cuts. Second person cuts. Okay, I'm doing okay. Third person cuts. Forget about it. I literally get out of my car and I start talking to that person and this person. Like, what are you doing? We've been waiting here for half an hour. What gives you the right to just cut in front of everybody? And I look around and I'm like the only person who got out of my car to try to take care of this situation. The person of like the 50 people there with the worst Hebrew is the only person trying to like make order of this complete balagan. So I'm like, yes, that's my New Yorker. That's like my whatever. And even one of the guys who was watching me was like, dude, this is how it is in Israel. Just deal with it. Like, you know, chill out. So, you know, there are those moments, of course, as well. But, you know, I'll just, you know, wrap up by saying that for me, the unique thing that is happening here in Israel is not only historical, but it's also very personal. I experience it here, like really, really closely. I would even say daily. Right? Both through my work with AMHSI, with seeing my kids, raising my kids, and living here. It's this thing I feel it's like where the historical and the personal are like, you know, coming together and colliding. And for me, it's like a really awesome thing. And it just opens up, you know, that whole conversation or adds to that conversation that's already been going on now really for a good few years. Like, it's like, I think I believe it's the strongest conversation, and it's the most important conversation that we as the Jewish people can be having today. Because to go back to what I shared with you at the beginning, 140 years ago in 1880, at the beginning of the Zionist movement, Zionism was just about to get off the ground, right? 3% of world Jewry lived in America and Israel combined. And today it's 85%. And we're living now in a world where there is, once again, right, two Jewish superpowers, America and Israel. And, you know, I'll just end. I mean, this could be maybe, you know, my next class that I teach, you know, in the series, you know, the continuation. But like, I'll just throw out questions that don't need to be answered right now. Like, where does America and Israel overlap? What are their similarities? What are their differences? What are the similarities and the differences between the American Jewish community and the Israeli Jewish community? And of course, you can't just say they're all alike on one side or the other, but just to the best of our ability in this conversation, you know, what are the generalities? What are the things that make us, you know, unique? And what are the things we share in common, right? And to borrow, you know, Daniel Gordis's main thesis of this book, and he tries really hard as an American Jew who also made Aliyah, to not come off judgmental. He says, you know, many times throughout the book, especially in the end, we need these two Jewish communities. We need them both to be vibrant and thriving and strong. We need each other. But sometimes today in the American Jewish community, people are like writing off Israel, right? And many times in the Israeli Jewish community, people are like, Americans, what do they know, right? And that's like a big issue. And I would even call it like a problem. And he talks about that at the very end of his book. You know, he kind of repaints the picture, so to speak. I'll just read maybe a few lines, and with this we'll end. He says, it seemed only natural that there would exist a strong and permanent bond between these two new communities. Israelis looked to America for political, economic, and diplomatic support, as well as immigration among some communities. They saw much to emulate in America's democratic society. Israel's founders borrowed language from America's Declaration of Independence, going back to Lisa's class, right? Admired its forward thinking and looked with awe on America's belief that anything is possible. American Jews saw in Israel an inspiring combination of idealized socialism, Jewish rebirth, a reimagined Jew, the end of Jewish victimhood, and much cause for pride. They saw some recompense for the Holocaust, a reborn future, and a reason to have hope. A powerful paragraph that basically sums up a lot of his book. And then he just says like this, yet that mutually celebratory relationship is stumbling, right? And I may just leave you guys with that, a little bit on a cliffhanger. You know, where are we at as a global Jewish community with these two big Jewish superpowers, America and Israel? Where are we at? What is our relationship like? Are we stumbling? Where are we stumbling? And what can we do in the future to bring these two communities closer together? Thank you guys for tuning in. It was fun to be with you all. Laila Tov from Israel.
Eva, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Was,
Akiva.
Laila Tov. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
No pressure. I just talked and talked and talked there.
It was very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing your perspective. I've heard very similar things from a lot of people who have made Aliyah.
You know, one of our students who's on the call right here, Aiden, am I allowed to say it?
Yeah.
So Aiden, who is one of our Impact Fellows, and he